All right, I'm here with Dusty S's coverage of IM Dallas 2023. I'm here with SEMPHIS following their relatively one-sided loss to FURIA. So I want to start off by asking about that match. What do you think went wrong in that match, considering that FURIA are a team you guys, you're in the same region, you sort of face them somewhat frequently. What do you think kind of went wrong in that match to make it so one-sided?
We actually don't play them as much as you might expect. We somehow seem to play everyone else but them. They're gone in Europe a lot, honestly. So while we do have more experience playing them than Europeans, for example, like G2, but it's not like we play them every day or anything. But I think what went wrong is our map pool wasn't really like strong enough to like. We had to kind of just decide if we wanted to let them pick Vertigo or not, and it was like we used to be decent at Vertigo, and then it felt like people kind of figured it out, and we lost our confidence on the map. And then we started kind of trying Anubis a little bit, but we're also not confident in that, so we kind of like banned Vertigo, hoping that they might just pick Ancient or something else, because like their Anubis win rate is not super high either. But like logically, it's not a bad choice. Like it's smart for them to do it if they did prep work for us. So like good play by them, honestly. Like I would have picked Anubis versus myself as well. But yeah, it was just kind of a gamble that didn't go our way for that map. So like Anubis is kind of like just chalked. Like we were not in a position to win that. We needed to win Inferno, and then we had a chance on Mirage. But our Inferno has just been so shaky versus the better teams. And I think one of the things we have to do is learn to take the rounds a little bit later, because when you're playing, and this is no offense to the teams we play, but when you play EG Black or ATK or Pain and stuff, like we're more like equal skill level to them. So when we play fast paced, it seems like we can trade a lot better. But once they start playing versus like the tier ones, like G2 and FURIA, that's when I think we need to have like a more of a fallback plan and take the rounds a little bit slower. So I mean, we recently, I don't know if it's official yet, so I won't say, but we started working with some people that help the mental side of the game. So hopefully that will help us progress in the future, because we're kind of revamping things here going forward. So this tournament was kind of like right as we're revamping. So we didn't change anything for this tournament, because it felt like when you make a change right before a tournament, more is going to go wrong than it's going to go well, because you didn't have enough time to implement it. But we're going to try to like review these losses and really start focusing on fixing our mistakes, because I think that's something in the past we weren't doing enough of and these type of tournaments give us more information to go off of like what our problems are and what we need to work on. So I just think we need to have more late rounds on T side, and CD side we need to have a little bit more of a, I don't want to say we obviously have a game plan, but we need to have we need all 5 players to really understand like the goal of the setup. And I think sometimes we'll have like the B players on Inferno and the A players might be disconnected a little bit. Online, it's not as bad because I can talk more in TeamSpeak, but on LAN, I can only take the 30 seconds pauses, and like there's only so much you can really do once it's live. Like coaching is a lot harder when you have like very small windows to talk than if you can just talk as much as you want, right? So.
Now, I want to sort of ask you about that. We talk. I think a big disadvantage NA teams have is that they almost exclusively play online, so they're very used to having their coach. Whether it's Spray XD, whether it's you, whether it's Becker, whether it's anyone, they always have their coach's ear and their coach's voice to sort of walk them through situations if the IGL gets needs some input. Do you think that's something that gives NA teams a disadvantage, that they aren't ready for these situations where they can't rely on the coach as much?
I try to stop talking in scrims and practice like a week or two before the event. Like versus the RMR, I think I didn't really talk in their matches or their scrims very much. Like I would still talk, but I would try not to be like, yo, rotate now, or say anything that wouldn't be there. So I tried to kind of mimic the event as best I could. But yeah, I mean, it's a fine line. Like honestly, I really think it's just the coaches need to do, it's more like prep work, honestly, at these events than actually like having impact in the game. It's like, sure, you can notice something like on Anubis. I noticed that Art was just fighting mid swing with an op. I'm sure you guys noticed if you were watching. So I was like, finally one around, David had an op, Cynic, and I was like, why don't you guys flashback Art, have a rifler walk up on the right side and just post on him? And then of course that's around they triple push mid and just killed us all. So it's like, like you try to read it as a coach, and then sometimes it feels like you lose them around, but even though the idea wasn't bad. So it's a fine line of like over calling the caller type thing, because like you don't want to tilt people either if they felt like, oh, they had an idea. But yeah, it's like, it's a learning experience for me too, right? Like I'm trying to get better every event of like when I should take a pause and when not. And like I said, this is more. I don't want to say it's a test event because that sounds bad, like we weren't going to try or something, but we're obviously trying. It was just like, this is a very like, I want to move forward with the information from this event and really try to solidify like our map pool, because I think that's like one of our biggest weaknesses right now is just, we're okay on a couple maps, but when a team has a really good Anubis, a really good Vertigo, and a decent Ancient, it really screws us over, like, so I think that's like, when you go into a map and your only 2 maps you can play G2 on, and they have the last veto is Inferno and Mirage, they're going to go Inferno. They have a 100% win rate. People were like, well, why did the SEMPHIS, or why did they let Inferno through? It's like, well, it's our best map too, and it's like the only other option is playing a map that we're guaranteed to lose on. So it's like, we just need to spend more time working, honestly. So we're going to go to the CCT event in, I don't know if we're going to Serbia, I think. I'm not exactly sure if that's like confirmed, but then we'll be doing a boot camp before then, playing that event. So hopefully we can take the mistakes here, boot camp a little bit there, implement, and see how it goes.
Now, you sort of talk about that process of improvement, and especially for, you as you're sort of letting the training wheels come off of Cynic as the IGL, especially when we go to these LAN events. It's not something you can take for granted that he was going to ultimately be the IGL of Nouns, because, you did have that brief period with SEMPHIS, your SEMPHIS, with Stamina.
Yeah.
With Stamina as the IGL. How do you feel like Cynic's development as an IGL has been since you've started working with him?
Well, I joined with like Gaming Gladiators, and I think there's been like a pretty big improvement from like when I first joined to right now. But obviously, like, there's always like work to be done, right? So I think one of the biggest things on our team is like, and this isn't specific to him, but like, just tilt when we go down. Like 05, 06, those are bad starts for us, and we're not the most resilient versus the good teams. Like, sure, if you're playing a team that you're better than, you can just win a couple and get your momentum back, but when we lose momentum versus good teams, we just get crushed. And I think that's like, I have a hard time figuring out the exact reason for it. So, and to me, it just seems to be like preparedness. Like when you don't have a lot of fallback plans and you start losing, I think people lose hope because they're like, well, what we're doing is not working. So why is it going to magically start working? So I think like just having more things. People might remember me as like that force bio, just rush all the time. That's not really what I want to do, right? So it's like, it's about implementing both styles, because like David likes to call really fast strats, and I think they're really good. So I have a hard time because it's like, I don't want to get away from the strengths, but I also want to bring in some more, like, I don't want to say like big strats, because that, like, anyone can just run and execute, but more map control into little plays. So like Inferno, you push back banana. Then once you have banana, you leave 1 logs. Then you push back mid. You smoke wrap, you molly lane. Now they don't have mid. They don't have banana. At this point, you can decide what you want to do. That's like pretty much what all top teams do. I don't feel like we do that enough, so that's just something I'm like trying to bring towards us, because like we don't really need to do it in NA for most of the people that we play. And I think that's the biggest thing for us, is just if we could practice and get punished more, versus better teams, I think that would help us realize like where our weaknesses lie.
Is that one of your big goals for, you said you're probably going to Serbia to play in one of those online CCT like grand final cups.
Yeah.
Is that one of your goals there, to sort of get punished by EU, to sort of beat out the bad habits from from the really weak NA scrims, really weak NA teams?
Well, we got punished here, so I want to take the punishment here and focus on in the boot camp, and then do better in Europe next time. So like that's the goal. It's always improvement, and like, this is the biggest event they've probably ever attended. Like, I think you could maybe make an argument that RMR is more prestigious just because you're qualifying for the actual major. Sticker money is like such a big amount of that. So I think the pressure of like qualifying for the RMR is actually higher, but in terms of like the actual tiers of teams here, this tournament is way harder, right? Like, who's the best team in the RMR is like Liquid and Furia, right? Here you have G2, Heroic, like, and you have Furia and Liquid. So it's like, it's a much harder event. So even though our result was poor, the teams we've played here are much better than anyone we've ever really played before. So, and that's not making excuses, because we deserve to lose. Like, people see me on Twitter and they're like, I'm just trolling. Like, it's so funny that people can't tell. Like, I'm saying we're going to beat G2 easily, and they're like, just like, whatever, man.
So I think one thing that we really can't take for granted with you as sort of a coach of this team is the fact that there's only maybe like 3 or 4 people in NA who have played, who have played 1.6, who have played a bit of Source, who have played CS:GO, who have played CS2, or well, who will be playing CS2. Have you ever considered the gravity of that? As that you're like one of the last bastions of our connection to the start of the CS:GO scene, and how important do you think that is for your team?
I'm not sure exactly how important it is to my team. I mean, like, I'm one of those guys that I hate being like classified as something. I just want to be like a regular person type thing. But it's obviously I played from 1.6 all the way till now, so I like CS, and that's why I'm still here, like doing this stuff because I don't know. I just really want the NA scene to do better again. But yeah, it's just like I don't know. When it comes to like coaching, it's like I have all the experience from playing on all the events, and like one of my problems is like sometimes things to me seem obvious, but then I forget that like they've never done it before. Like they never played at these events before. Like a small example would just be like I was like, "Yo, a week before you should start wearing your in-ears." I don't think anyone listened to me, and then they were complaining today like, "Oh, my ears hurt," and that's kind of what I mean is like to be a pro gamer isn't just about like playing a lot of Counter-Strike. You want to wake up at the right time. You want to make sure you're eating relatively decently. You don't have to be fitness model, right? But like you probably shouldn't be eating burgers and pizza right before you play an important game, that stuff. So I think like we're not doing all the little things as efficiently as like teams like Liquid. Like for example, I go down to do cardio in the morning at 7 a.m. Device is in there training, Twist is in there, a couple other people. So like these people don't even play till later in the day, right? Like they didn't have to wake up that early. So I think there's people don't realize why some of the players have longevity in the game that they do, and I think like players like Device and Twist that are taking care of themselves, it's like it's going to only help, right? So convincing people of that can be difficult because they like, to them it's like just doesn't matter, right? But I don't know. I think it's pretty evident that even Australis when they had their big run, they were all waking up and doing some cardio together, doing a little. And like I said, you don't want to train too hard. You don't want to you don't want to fatigue your body so you're like sore and tired, but you want to just enough to be healthy and feel good. So I think there's like little things like that, and then secondly, just in the server, like reviewing losses, being motivated to review your losses is different than just doing it because you feel like you have to. And I'm just, like I said, going forward, I really want to just implement those things, like really focus on actually improving our mistakes, because I feel like sometimes we just get away with things in NA because it's NA, and we got to stop doing that.
And so, last question, you're talking a lot about sort of the sustainability of the team through, good practices like working out, having a good schedule, not eating junk food, all the sort of bad traps that NA players fall into, especially at the ECL level. One of those big sort of traps that NA teams fall into is they have no concept of sustainability because they don't have an org that's willing to support them. With this combination of you as sort of a leadership figure and a more senior voice in the team, and now having Nouns staying with you guys at least up until the major next year, what do you think the upper limit of this team is now that they have sort of these pillars of support in place?
Like only time can really tell, because we're going to be implementing a lot of new things. We got a lot bigger budget this year. We have more boot camp potential. We have more staff to help us. So it's going to be a big change and a big shock for everyone, including myself. So going forward, we're just going to try to act more like a tier 1 org, right? Like that's the goal, is be more like maybe a tier 1.5 is more realistic, right? Like we're probably not going to jump up to being as good as Navi in a week, but just getting a little bit higher than our current level would be a win for us. We don't expect to go to every event and just magically win it, but we want to start being more competitive. And this is just my opinion, I really wish that in CS2 hopefully we can get ESL back in NA, with Liquid, FURIA, and all these teams, because I really, when I was playing, it helped so much. You had Renegades, you had FURIA, Liquid, Splice, EG, Genji. There's so many teams that were playing here, Whereas right now, when FURIA and Liquid leave, man, there's no one to play, really. There's this. It's like we scrim the same 3 teams every day, and that's not me making an excuse. And we could obviously be doing more. It's just if you had a proper league where they're around for 2 or 3 months, at least people would get a little bit more reps versus the better teams before they leave again. Because when they leave, it's pretty brutal. Sometimes we try to log on, and it's we have 1 scrim, so it's so then it's we got to review, and then people get tired of reviewing for 3 days in a row, and it's yeah, we got to find one of my goals now is have like multiple different practice days depending on what we can do, you know, like match practice day, like a day where we have a lot of scrims, and then if we do have a day where we don't have a lot of scrims, we want to make that day as useful as possible and maximize the amount of like quality that we're doing, because like if we only have one scrim, we want to make that count, which means like for anyone that is coming up, when you go into a scrim on Inferno, let's say you're playing a team that maybe you feel like you shouldn't scrim because you're better than them, just make a goal, right? Like on it, say you're playing Inferno, banana control, we're going to just fight banana every round. We don't care if we're dying, we don't care if we're losing, we're just going to practice relentlessly fighting it. We're going to force buy FAMASas and MP9s every round just to practice holding B with bad weapons. Like, you can make a goal and you can make the scrim harder on yourself if you want. But the problem with that is a lot of people get frustrated then when they lose the scrim to the bad team that they felt that they should be, but it's like you're practicing something, you have a purpose, so you don't need to ever get mad when you lose a scrim, because who cares? It's a scrim. There's no official record of it. So that's the one thing I really think NA players need to get better at, is like taking NA like scrims seriously, because other than maybe like EG and Liquid, it just feels like sometimes the gloves just come off and people start scrimming and doing wild stuff, and like it ruins our prac and their prac, or sometimes we ruin their prac, you know, so it's just like, it's just frustrating sometimes. So we're just trying to work on it.
All right, thank you so much for your time, SEMPHIS. Thanks so much for your time. Commiserations on the loss, but it sounds like you guys definitely have a plan for the future.
Yeah, hopefully.
All right, hopefully.